Hey everyone, I'm just kind of hanging out here relaxing a little bit, and I thought I would share some ideas for what to do when you've got too much to do. Because honestly, it's just been an intense last month work-wise. I'm grateful for it, but it's also been a lot. And so I've been managing it all, and I thought I would just share some ideas for how to manage life when it just gets to be a lot, because we all have those times when it gets to be totally overwhelming. And I think because this channel is a lot about minimalism, I also just want to address that there can be other types of clutter in our life that can be overwhelming. Like there's just so much going on that it clutters our brain and we can feel overwhelmed. And so I think part of this is how to declutter your life a little bit, not in the object sense, but in a more broad kind of theoretical sense. But we'll get more into that. I also want to share, I'm really excited. Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare, and I will talk more about them later in the video, but I'm stoked about that because I think they're a really cool company for creatives and people looking to learn more. So stick around to hear a little bit more about them. So it's been an intense period of time for me of just working a full-time job, 2 side hustles, and there have been some specific things that have really helped, I think. I think the first thing that I do to try to kind of keep myself level during these times of stress is to remind myself that, you know what, it's not going to be this intense forever. Usually when there are periods of stress at work, it's not like it's literally gonna stay at that level of intensity forever. Even if it's like a new job where you're taking on a lot more hours or something, usually eventually that will become the new normal and you'll find ways of managing it and navigating it so that you're not as overwhelmed. But often when you take on a new role or things are just more intense for a period of time, it can feel overwhelming. You'll have this sense like, is this just gonna last forever and get worse and worse and worse, or stay this level of horrible, stressful intensity? But the reality is it's probably going to improve over time and you're gonna find ways to navigate it and manage it much better, and it just won't feel as overwhelming as you gain more experience. But just reminding myself when I'm going into those periods of time that it's going to eventually end, or at least reduce in intensity, helps me kind of put that brave face on and go forward. The second thing I kind of remind myself of during these periods of having more to do is just that often the anticipation of that stressful thing is actually way worse than the actual act of doing the thing. Because the way our brains work is that we can only focus on so much at one time. And also often when we're actively working, we kind of enter this flow state where we're very, very focused. Usually the actual act of getting something done or doing it isn't so bad, and you kind of lose a sense of time and you just kind of do it and get it done. But it's that anticipation, that dread, wondering if I'm going to be able to handle it, worrying about it, that really feels so horrible. And so in those moments where I'm feeling that anticipatory stress, reminding myself that that experience in that moment is probably some of the worst that it's going to get is a bit of a comfort to me, and it kind of levels me a little bit. And part of that is also reminding myself that stressing about it more probably isn't helpful. Yes, there's a healthy amount of stress that kind of propels us forward and motivates us. But if I'm getting to the point where I'm just dreading a period of time because it's going to be way more intense, just realizing that that anticipation is what's bad, but that also ultimately that anticipation and stress over it isn't going to help me do any better, I'm able to let go of some of that anxiety and stress and look at it from the outside a little bit and be able to move past it. I think part of that is a theme that I talk a lot about in this channel, which is that by acknowledging right now I'm experiencing some anticipatory stress, you're actually labeling the emotion and what you're feeling then. Maybe it's anxiety. And by simply labeling an emotion, you actually create some space between your true inner self and that emotion. And then you're able to not totally let that emotion determine your behaviors and your actions and what you're going to do about the situation. And it might even help lessen the intensity of that emotion. There are actual therapies that focus on these types of strategies of just like labeling and naming emotions help lessen the intensity. So I think just recognizing that it's not that helpful, that stress is actually probably more unpleasant than the actual act of what you're going to do, that it's not that useful to you, and you can decide to acknowledge it, feel it for a minute, but then decide to move past it, I think can be really helpful. And in those moments when you want to move past it, I don't necessarily mean like avoid the feeling altogether, maybe really acknowledge it, experience it, but then find some way to distract yourself or do something enjoyable, or maybe even just dive into the work. Because again, your brain can only focus on so much at one time. So if you focus it on something else, you'll likely start to feel a lot better. The third thing I want to mention is during these times of increased stress, it's easy to let go of really taking care of yourself. And I know that self-care is such a cliche these days, I think, but I do think it is incredibly important to make sure you're doing the things to like nourish your body and sort of your mind and your soul. Like making sure that you're doing things that you enjoy, that keep you energized and motivated. It's so incredibly important to budget that time into your schedule. And especially in times when maybe work is demanding a lot of us, especially if you're a perfectionistic type, which I've talked about in previous videos. Often people who are perfectionists don't even realize they're perfectionists because they're so perfectionistic. But I do think that for those perfectionists out there, it's easy to let that self-care go to the wayside. And so really integrating it into your life and your schedule is so important. I have to admit, I think these days a lot of people use the term self-care to sort of justify doing things that aren't productive or maybe even are detrimental to them in some way. And of course we need rest. Of course sometimes we just need to like binge watch a little TV or do whatever it is that allows you to really, really relax. We all need a little bit of that. But I also think self-care is a lot more than that. It's actually about growth and learning and making sure that you're doing things to take care of yourself, getting things done that just like have to get done, and not putting off things like paperwork or like things we need to do. I think part of self-care is just like making sure we're doing the things we need to do, like grocery shop, like getting some exercise, like getting any like paperwork or bills out of the way, doing things that take care of us, I think is a huge part of self-care. And I also think one big part of self-care is a feeling of accomplishment and of growth. And that's actually where I think the sponsor of this video is very relevant, actually. Skillshare is a great online learning community where you can learn about a lot of different topics, a lot of especially creative areas like photography, illustration, graphic design, web design. And you can take these courses that are ad-free, that are built to be, a full course, so you're really learning something, and be able to either deepen your knowledge of something you already know about or try something new that you've never really had the chance to or the confidence to. I think taking advantage of something like Skillshare is really, really great for self-care, because if you're actually learning something new or investing in yourself to grow, that's going to make you increase in your own confidence and in your abilities and your skills. I just think by taking an online course, it's such an easy way to actually learn something new that you can apply to your life. Like I recently started taking this course on Skillshare about productivity for creatives and creating systems in your approach to work to make the whole process go more smoothly and more efficiently. And thus far, I found it really, really helpful. I also started taking a course on portrait photography, as well as one on making a video really look cinematic. And I think that taking these courses has really just like jump-started a lot of my creative juices and made me excited to jump back into the projects that I'm already working on. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that doing something like Skillshare can actually allow you to do self-care just in a slightly different way, and that you're learning something new, you're rejuvenating your interest, You're maybe growing a part of you that maybe even is like totally separate from the workload that you have and gives you a little bit of a break from that, but a break in a way that feels energizing rather than just kind of like lying around. But also the first 1,000 people to click the link below in the description box will actually get a free trial of Skillshare. So if you're interested, just give it a click and give it a try. My fourth recommendation to how to manage a lot of stress and a lot of things going on in your life is to prioritize, to really sit down and intentionally plan how you are going to approach a really stressful period of time. And really evaluate for this period of time what has to be my priority or what is my priority based on my values and what's important to me. And actually be deliberate about how you're going to approach what areas you're going to lean into more and what areas you might lean back from a little bit. And I can give you an example for me. A few videos ago, I think the one on my secret clutter zone where I kind of show where clutter tends to pile up for me, I talked about how over the next couple of months, I knew that I would have a lot more going on with my job and my work, and that it would be a really intense period of time. And so I deliberately told you guys, I don't know that I'm going to be able to keep up the same pacing for videos on YouTube of doing 2 times a week. And while my YouTube channel is important to me and that I think it's a really fun creative outlet that I use almost as self-care and to keep myself accountable, I also realized, with my other work demands and clients that I'm working with, I really need to prioritize them during this time. I can't let people down. And so I did it with intention. I knew I would be busy during this time. And while in some ways I wish I were making more videos, this is just the reality right now. And that doesn't mean it's gonna last forever. I'm hoping to kind of re-up the frequency of my videos once this period of time passes and make sure that I'm creating a lot of new content. But I think being aware that we can't do everything all the time perfectly and being willing to take a little bit of a step back in some areas for a period of time can be actually really healthy. And the thing is, I think part of this is not having all or nothing or black and white thinking, where it's like, oh, I'm stressed, that means I'm gonna quit this and I'm gonna quit that. Maybe it doesn't have to be that you're just like giving up on things. Maybe it means a brief hiatus. You're taking a break from something for a while, or you're just decreasing the intensity of certain areas of your life. But as long as you have an attitude of like, I'm aware this is a stressful time and I need to have a little self-compassion and self-understanding that this area has to be like a little bit less of a priority right now just because of logistics. That doesn't mean it's going to be less of a priority in the future, but to do it with intention and to plan for it can allow you to not feel so guilty about it, to be okay with maybe not being quite as productive in certain areas of your life, but being more productive in other areas of your life. And I think this leads smoothly into my fifth piece of advice, is to just recognize some negative self-talk when it's happening. I think when we get stressed out, it's easy to start turning in and blaming ourselves for either getting ourselves into this situation or just kind of questioning, why can't I handle and juggle all these different things at once? But I think it's important to practice some self-compassion, to recognize it when we're engaging in negative self-talk and say, hey, I don't have to beat myself up just because I'm overwhelmed right now. And I know it sounds obvious, like don't negative self-talk, but I think the key that I'm trying to say right here is that it's important to recognize it in the moment when it's happening. Like really try to have a bit of a radar or like an antenna up for negative self-talk during these stressful times. Because I think it's so easy to just let it happen in the moment and not do anything about it, but we can take action in our thought life and remind ourselves, oh wait, what I just thought to myself, that was negative self-talk. And that's just my stress coming out in a weird way. And I don't have to listen to that thought. I don't have to believe that thought, and I can move on from it. I think one way to combat that negative self-talk is both obviously to identify it as such, as I just mentioned, but then also to replace it with a positive thought, to think about one thing that you accomplished recently that you feel really good about. Even if you didn't do it perfectly, even if it's a minor thing, what's one thing that you accomplished that you feel good about? Doing that sort of thing, positive psychology shows, really helps us increase our sense of well-being and happiness. So I just wanted to share some of these tips for how to manage it when we have a lot going on. And I've dealt with times in life where I've just felt totally overwhelmed. I remember when I was working to get my PhD and I was giving therapy 2 or 3 days a week. I was taking classes. I was working on a lot of different research projects. I was teaching a college course. I was working on my dissertation. So like I had to kind of juggle all these different roles and jobs and deadlines, and I would get so overwhelmed. And I think I used all these strategies through that, as well as now, honestly, this last month has been like the most stressful period of time maybe ever in my life because I've had a lot going on. And so I think just being able to, prioritize, recognize when I'm being hard on myself, recognize when I'm feeling overwhelmed and it's just that anticipatory anxiety, and really remember that it's also important to budget in time for relaxation, time for self-growth, I think is important. And also recognizing that we can't always do it all. Some things may have to be on the back burner for a little period of time, and that's okay. So if any of you have ideas about how to declutter those stressors in life a little bit, or declutter the excess in life, or just reduce stress during stressful periods of time, please feel free to share in the comments below. I'd love to hear your tips and ideas. And also, if we haven't met before, I'm Aylin, and this is my channel, Slice of Light. If you ended up liking this video, hit the thumbs up button. And if you want to see more videos on simple living, minimalism, living more intentionally, and building an empowering mindset, then definitely do subscribe below. And that's really all I have for you today. But thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.